The security camera doesn't blink. A young blonde woman threads a cart through a late-night checkout aisle, glances over her shoulder, and then contact. Two plainclothes loss prevention officers reach for her purse strap. In an instant, she drops the bag, kicks off her flip-flops, and bolts barefoot into the dark. At the sliding doors, her boyfriend pauses and watches her fly past him. It is around 2 a.m. at a Walmart supercenter on Cobb Parkway in Marietta, Georgia. The woman is Tiffany Michelle Whitton, 26, a mother and a daughter with a life that had narrowed to drugs, theft, and survival. She will not be seen again. There is no body, no murder scene, and, years later, no arrests. A detective would call the case an anomaly, a haunting absence wedged between a final, grainy frame and silence. This is the story of the last known hours of Tiffany Whitton, the life that led her to those doors, and the investigation that followed. Conflicting statements, fruitless searches, a tip about a barrel off a North Georgia bridge, and a family's relentless push for answers. We will walk through the verified record, what we can see, what was said, what was checked, and only then weigh the competing explanations before applying the simplest test of all: the razor of parsimony. Welcome to Bad Things. Join us as we retrace Tiffany's steps, reconstruct the night she vanished, examine every major theory, and determine what most likely happened. Do you want to bring bad things with you wherever you go? Our episodes are now available as a podcast. Look us up on your favorite podcast app and listen to the most truth-seeking true crime podcast out there. Timeline. Early life and background. Tiffany Michelle Whitton was born on January 30th, 1987, in Kennesaw, Georgia, a suburb northwest of Atlanta. To those who knew her as a child, she was bright, outgoing, and impulsive. Her mother, Lisa Daniels, often said Tiffany only had two speeds: on and off, a personality that could be magnetic in its charm or exhausting in its intensity. She was quick to laugh, affectionate toward children and the elderly, and the type of person who, as her family put it, never met a stranger. But her mother also remembered a troubling undercurrent that ran from Tiffany's earliest years. Lisa later admitted that her daughter began stealing when she was 2, pocketing items and then lying about it, a compulsion that escalated as she grew older. By her teenage years, Tiffany was already on probation for burglary, and in her early 20s she served prison time for a violent home invasion. Addiction shadowed much of her adolescence and adulthood. First pills, later heroin, and methamphetamine. Tiffany became pregnant while still in high school. She placed that first baby for adoption, a decision relatives say left a permanent mark. In 2006, she gave birth to a second daughter, Addison, but Tiffany's escalating drug use made her an unfit parent. Lisa stepped in to raise the girl, taking legal custody and providing stability that Tiffany could not. By her early 20s, Tiffany was trying to balance motherhood, probation, and the pull of addiction. For a time, she worked as a waitress at the IHOP across from the Walmart, where she would later be seen for the last time. Co-workers recalled her showing up with visible track marks and the jittery demeanor of someone high. Rehab stints failed to hold. Each attempt ended with relapse. In the summer of 2013, after being fired from IHOP for stealing, she was unemployed, broke, and drifting between friends' couches. Lisa struggled with how much contact to allow. In one of their final conversations, on August 31st, they chatted casually about college football before Lisa finally told her daughter she had to cut ties for her own sanity. "I can't do this anymore." It was the last time they would ever speak. Meeting Ashley, Red Caudle. Around that same summer, Tiffany met Ashley Christopher Red Caudle, a wiry man 5 years older with tattoos up his arms and a criminal record that mirrored hers. Caudle had just been released from prison on drug-related charges and was deeply entrenched in the Atlanta meth scene. By most accounts, their connection was fast and destructive. They began using crystal meth together, and soon Tiffany moved in with him and his young daughter, Charlie. Caudle later claimed that Tiffany bonded quickly with the child and was the first woman who ever treated his daughter like family. But the couple's relationship was volatile, marked by screaming fights, police calls, and eventual evictions. To Tiffany's grandmother, Anita Boyette, the partnership was alarming. She met Claude that summer and was struck not just by his appearance, but by the people who orbited him: dealers, users, and unstable characters. Anita worried aloud about the path her granddaughter was on. In early September, Tiffany phoned Anita, saying she had no food or clean clothes. Anita took her to a laundromat and bought groceries. When Anita pleaded with her to leave Caudle and come home, Tiffany refused. "I wouldn't go without Ashley," she told her. That choice tied her fate even more tightly to Caudle's world. The night of September 12th to 13th, 2013. On the evening of September 12th, Tiffany and Caudle spent time at the apartment of Stephen Weinstein, another user in their circle. Weinstein later told police the two had been taking drugs before borrowing his red pickup truck. They drove to the Walmart Supercenter on Cobb Parkway sometime around 1 a.m. Surveillance footage captured their movements for nearly an hour. Tiffany appeared restless, agitated, picking items up and discarding them, while Caudle trailed with a roll of cash visible in his hands. Store employees later said Tiffany had concealed roughly $20 worth of merchandise in her purse. Around 2 a.m. at the checkout lanes, two plainclothes loss prevention officers approached Tiffany. They grabbed her purse strap and identified themselves. In a flash, she yanked away, dropped the bag, slipped off her flip-flops, and sprinted for the exit barefoot. The camera shows Caudle standing at the sliding doors as she streaked past him. He does not pursue her. He does not look panicked. He just watches. What happened next is a matter of dispute. Caudle would later claim he pulled a knife to keep security from holding her, but the video shows nothing of the kind. He also claimed to have searched for her, though no footage shows him leaving the store in a hurry. Outside, across the street at IHOP, an old acquaintance named Sheila Fuller was smoking a cigarette. She had once housed Tiffany, but evicted her for stealing. Fuller recalled seeing Caudle sitting calmly on a bench after 2 a.m., telling her Tiffany had been caught shoplifting and ran off. When she suggested he call Tiffany's phone, Caudle pulled the phone out of his pocket and said it was charging. He didn't look worried, Fuller later told investigators. He was just sitting there. Around 3:30 a.m., Weinstein and two women arrived in a car to pick Caudle up. They said they drove around the area looking for Tiffany, but eventually returned to their drug house. Caudle refused to take them to his truck, which was still in the Walmart parking lot, explaining that it contained drugs and he didn't want to risk police finding them. From that moment, Tiffany vanished. Immediate aftermath. In the following days, Caudle told police he called hospitals, jails, and Tiffany's ex-boyfriends to see if she had turned up. Phone records support that some calls were made. What he did not do was notify Tiffany's family. Meanwhile, Tiffany's phone, left behind in her purse, went silent. Her social media activity had already stopped in early September, about 2 weeks before the Walmart incident. Friends who normally saw her online noticed her absence. Her family, used to her disappearing during drug binges, assumed she would resurface. 2 months passed before Anita Boyette received a civil demand letter from a law firm representing Walmart, seeking payment for stolen merchandise. Alarmed, she called Caudle. He told her flatly Tiffany disappeared that night and seemed more upset about losing the Coach purse he had bought her than about Tiffany herself. Lisa Daniels later phoned him before Thanksgiving. He repeated that he had searched for her and still loved her. But still, no one reported her missing. Police involvement. Finally, on January 10, 2014, 4 months after that night, Lisa Daniels and Anita Boyette filed a missing person report with the Marietta Police Department. The first detective on the case brushed it off, suggesting Tiffany was probably just binging and would show up or get arrested eventually. Weeks later, the case was reassigned to Detective Johnny Moeller, a veteran investigator. On January 27th, she reviewed the Walmart surveillance tape. What she saw convinced her that something far more serious had happened. "I don't believe she's missing on her own accord," she told Lisa. From that point forward, the case was treated as a potential homicide. Raids and searches. In March 2014, a multi-agency drug task force raided the Powder Springs house where Tiffany and Caudle had been staying. Inside, they found meth, weapons, and a filthy interior littered with dog feces. 8 people, including Caudle, were arrested. The raid had a dual purpose: to clean out a known drug house and to pressure associates into revealing what happened to Tiffany. No one talked. 4 months later, investigators searched Caudle's mother's home in Marietta. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Crews dug up part of the yard and crawl space. Nothing. Another search of Caudle's residence in July 2014 likewise yielded nothing substantial. In September of that year, Lisa Daniels held a press conference announcing a $2,500 reward for information. She pleaded for anyone who knew what happened to her daughter to come forward. Detective Moeller chased leads relentlessly but grew increasingly frustrated. In March 2015, she left the case, saying the inability to resolve it had become unbearable. The investigation passed to Detective Mike Freer, and by January 2016, it landed in Cobb County's Cold Case Unit. The Lake Allatoona tip. One of the most dramatic moments in the investigation came in 2015 when a meth trafficker told prosecutors that Caudle and his associates had driven to Lake Allatoona shortly after Tiffany vanished. According to the informant, they rolled a concrete-filled barrel off the Bethany Bridge. The barrel struck the structure, leaving visible damage, and supposedly contained Tiffany's body. Detectives checked the bridge. There was indeed a scar on the concrete, consistent with something heavy being shoved over the side. Sonar scans picked up a large object on the lake bed 40 feet below. Divers went in. What they pulled out was a massive chunk of construction concrete, not a barrel. The search stopped there. Media coverage and interviews. By 2016, the case had drawn wider attention. Journalist Tom Junod of Esquire magazine interviewed Caudle in prison. Caudle oscillated between professing undying love for Tiffany and dismissing her disappearance. Asked what happened that night, he shrugged. "She just ran. I don't know what happened to her." He admitted he should have chased her and said guilt kept him awake at night. But in another recorded conversation, Caudle waved Tiffany's missing person flyer and laughed. "They think I killed that for real." Detectives noted how his story shifted. At times he said he pulled a knife on Walmart security, other times a gun. The video disproved both. He told some people he called Tiffany's phone from IHOP, but phone records show he did not. Witnesses remembered he had her phone in his hand that night. Ongoing search for answers. Through it all, Lisa Daniels has never stopped searching. She manages a Facebook page called Find Tiffany Whitton, fields every tip, and has driven to highway ramps to investigate rumors of a blonde panhandler. In one interview, she said simply, "I'll die not knowing what happened." As of 2025, more than a decade after Tiffany ran barefoot into the night, her case remains officially unsolved. No arrests, no remains, and no clear answers. What investigators do have is a web of testimony, shifting stories, and a void where Tiffany's life used to be. Theories. The disappearance of Tiffany Whitton has produced a tangle of explanations, each competing to account for what happened between her sprint from Walmart and her complete absence thereafter. Law enforcement, journalists, family members, and internet sleuths have all proposed possibilities. Some are straightforward, others rely on coincidences, but all exist because Tiffany left behind no trace. Theory 1. Ashley Red Cordell was responsible. Many observers, from investigators to Tiffany's own family, have focused suspicion on her boyfriend, Ashley Cordell. He was with her at Walmart, he held her phone after she ran, and he never reported her missing. Detectives classified him as a person of interest and kept him under scrutiny. Supporters of this theory emphasize his inconsistent statements. At different times, he claimed to have pulled a knife, later a gun, on Walmart staff, neither supported by video. He told some people he called Tiffany's phone after she disappeared, though phone records do not back that up. His tone also fluctuated. In one interview, he said he regretted not protecting her. In another, he laughed about being suspected of killing her. The argument against the theory is the absence of hard proof. Repeated searches of homes and properties turned up no remains, no physical evidence, and no direct witness testimony placing him at a crime. Even prosecutors acknowledged they lacked a case strong enough to bring to court. In short, Cordell remains the most obvious suspect to many, but without evidence beyond suspicion and contradictions, the theory is unresolved. Theory 2. Accidental overdose. Another explanation suggests Tiffany's own drug use may have killed her. On the night she vanished, she was using heroin and meth, substances she often mixed in dangerous amounts. If she slipped away into the wooded areas behind a Walmart, she could have injected more, collapsed, and died. This idea has been considered by investigators. It fits the reality of Tiffany's struggles. Her mother described her as caught in cycles of relapse. Friends said she frequently displayed fresh track marks, and her behavior inside Walmart that night showed agitation consistent with being high. The weakness in this theory lies in logistics. Tiffany fled without her purse, shoes, or phone. Without money or supplies, her ability to use more drugs immediately is questionable. Searches around the store and nearby woods never uncovered a body, and no one reported stumbling across remains. For her to overdose unnoticed, someone would have had to remove her body afterward, bringing the focus back to those she was with. Theory 3. Stranger abduction. There is also the possibility that Tiffany encountered a predator in the parking lot. The Walmart supercenter sits along a busy corridor known for transients and petty crime. A barefoot young woman, panicked and alone at 2 a.m., could have been vulnerable to someone offering a ride or forcing her into a vehicle. Detective Johnny Moeller acknowledged that abduction was examined. It is not impossible that an opportunist capitalized on the moment Tiffany burst through those doors. Yet this scenario depends on timing that borders on uncanny. A stranger would have had to be present, ready and able to act in the narrow window between her exit and Cordell's reappearance across the street. Cameras and witnesses provided no indication of another person intercepting her. Lisa Daniels has also pointed out her daughter's aggressive streak. She would fight like a man, she once said, skeptical that Tiffany would climb willingly into a stranger's car. Without corroboration, abduction remains a thin thread. Theory 4. Voluntary disappearance. Some argue Tiffany may have staged her own disappearance. She had been in and out of jail, was facing probation issues, and could have feared returning to custody if prosecuted for shoplifting. Online forums have debated whether she might have seized the chaotic Walmart incident as a chance to start over somewhere else. Her history provides partial support. Tiffany had vanished for weeks before, cutting off contact, which initially dulled her family's alarm. Her half-brother Blake even claimed he received a call in January 2014 that he believed came from Tiffany, suggesting she might still have been alive. But the theory crumbles against practical details. Tiffany abandoned her purse, phone, and identification, the essentials for anyone trying to disappear deliberately. She was addicted to heroin and meth with no money, car, or support system. Investigators later reviewed phone records and found no sign she reached out to anyone after that night. Detective Moeller said plainly, "I don't believe she's missing on her own accord." Theory 5. Another member of the drug circle. Finally, some suggest that Tiffany may have crossed paths with someone else in Caudle's meth network who harmed her. One name that surfaces is Jason Zuccherini, a volatile user who had once dated Tiffany briefly. He was with Weinstein when they picked up Caudle after Tiffany ran. Months later, Zuccherini broke into a woman's home at 4 a.m., hallucinating, and babbled about men pursuing him for a crime against a woman. Caudle himself later hinted that others should be considered, saying in one interview that perhaps people were overlooking new possibilities. To some, that sounded like deflection. To others, an admission that others in the drug scene might know more. Detectives, however, never classified Zuccherini as a person of interest. His later behavior was attributed to meth-induced paranoia. Without direct evidence, the idea that another dealer or associate killed Tiffany remains conjecture, overlapping with suspicions of Caudle, since he was the common link between all parties. Weighing the theories. These 5 theories, Caudle's guilt, overdose, abduction, voluntary disappearance, or third-party involvement, are largely mutually exclusive. Each seeks to explain Tiffany's sudden absence in a different way. None has produced definitive proof. Investigators continue to describe the case as unsolved. What they do have are fragments. A mother who insists Tiffany would never abandon her child forever. A video that captures her final dash. A boyfriend whose shifting stories invite scrutiny. And a series of leads that collapse under closer examination. Which of these theories holds up best under analysis? To answer that, we need to cut through speculation and test the scenarios against the evidence with the simplest tool available. What most likely happened? When faced with multiple possible explanations, the principle of Occam's razor suggests the simplest scenario that accounts for all the known facts is usually the closest to the truth. In Tiffany Whitton's case, that path points back to the person who was with her, who had both opportunity and motive, and whose conduct afterward remains troubling. Ashley Red Caudle. This conclusion does not necessarily mean Tiffany was deliberately murdered in a planned way. The likelier explanation is that Tiffany either died during a confrontation with Caudle or suffered a fatal drug episode that he then concealed to protect himself. Either version places him at the center. The case for opportunity. The last confirmed sighting of Tiffany is on Walmart's surveillance video. She bolts barefoot into the night, past the one person she knew best. Caudle in shoes, sober enough to stand still, with no one restraining him, had every chance to follow her. Instead, he stayed in the doorway, and minutes later, was seen calmly sitting across the street. Investigators have repeatedly emphasized that this matters. As Detective Johnny Moeller said after reviewing the tape, she didn't just vanish on her own. Something happened that night. The most logical candidate to know what that something was is the man standing at the doors. Means and capability. Tiffany was 5'2" and barely over 100 pounds. Caudle was taller, stronger, and by witness accounts prone to outbursts. He also had a truck that night, a crucial advantage if he needed to move a body. In one telling comment, a fellow user recalled Caudle refusing to approach his vehicle after Tiffany disappeared, saying it contained drugs. To investigators, that was revealing. He was acutely aware of what police finding that truck might mean. Even if Tiffany overdosed alone, Caudle still had the means to conceal it. He had the transportation, the criminal contacts, and the experience of someone who lived in a world where police attention had to be avoided at all costs. Motive. Motive in this case may not have been singular, but layered. Tiffany's heroin use irritated Caudle, who preferred meth and despised her habit. Their relationship was volatile, with documented incidents of screaming fights and police calls. She had also just embarrassed him in public, stealing items while he flashed large amounts of cash, potentially drawing attention to both of them and the drugs in his vehicle. In short, Tiffany had become a liability, unstable, addicted, and threatening his fragile operation. As her grandmother recalled, when Anita asked him what happened to Tiffany, his answer was not grief, but frustration about losing a purse. That detail, while small, speaks to priorities. Behavior after the disappearance. More than anything else, Caudle's behavior afterward raises suspicion. He never alerted police or Tiffany's family. When finally questioned by relatives, he downplayed the entire incident. His later interviews alternated between remorseful and mocking. The contrast between remorse and mockery didn't necessarily cancel out. It showed how his story shifted with context. For investigators, that variability was the issue. People who are straightforward usually repeat the same account. Caudle's narrative kept changing, suggesting he was shaping his words to the moment rather than relying on memory. A probable sequence. Piecing the strands together, the most likely sequence is stark. Tiffany fled Walmart in panic, and at some point after leaving camera view, she and Caudle reconnected. Whether they argued and he lashed out, or she collapsed from drugs, her life ended in those hours. Caudle, facing the risk of police discovering drugs in his vehicle, took steps to make sure Tiffany would not be found. He may have enlisted associates like Weinstein and the two women who picked him up. The Lake Allatoona story about a concrete-filled barrel, though unproven, fits the pattern of disposal that investigators have long suspected. The object recovered from the lake turned out to be construction debris, but the damaged bridge and the specificity of the tip suggest that at least some in his circle believed a disposal had occurred. From that night forward, Tiffany was never seen again. The weight of absence. The lack of a body remains the central obstacle to resolution. Without it, there is no crime scene, no forensics, no certainty. For Tiffany's family, that absence is agony. As Lisa Daniels has said, "There's no answer, there's only absence." And yet, within that absence, patterns emerge. Caudle's contradictions, his detachment, his proximity, his access, his indifference. They form a picture that, while circumstantial, is consistent. Tiffany's story is not one of a stranger's sudden violence, nor of a carefully plotted disappearance. It is the story of a volatile relationship, drugs, and a moment when one man had both the means and the incentive to ensure she never came back. What most likely happened is that Tiffany Whitton's final night did not end in freedom, as her dash from Walmart might have suggested, but in silence at the hands of someone she trusted. Whether through violence, neglect, or concealment of an overdose, Ashley Caudle had the opportunity, the motive, and the ability to make her disappear. And his actions since then only deepen that conclusion. For more than a decade, Tiffany's family has lived in the shadow of that absence, fighting to keep her name alive, hoping someone from Caudle's circle will one day speak. Until then, the simplest explanation remains the strongest. Tiffany's disappearance was not a mystery of strangers or chance. It was a tragedy rooted in the life she shared with Ashley Caudle, and in the moment he chose not to chase after her.